Cameroon is one of the West African countries being blamed for the recent flooding in Africa. Some argue that these floods result from the release of water from dams, such as the Logdo Dam in Cameroon. The Logdo Dam, located on the Benue River, was constructed to provide hydroelectric power, irrigation, and fishing opportunities. However, during periods of heavy rainfall, the dam's reservoirs can reach capacity, necessitating the release of excess water to prevent structural damage. This release can lead to downstream flooding, impacting communities and agricultural lands in Cameroon and neighboring countries. Others believe that the flooding is primarily due to climate change and human practices, including urban development and poor waste management, which negatively impact nature. Climate change has led to an increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, such as heavy rainfall, which overwhelms existing infrastructure. Urban development often reduces the land's natural ability to absorb water, as concrete and asphalt surfaces replace vegetation and wetlands. Poor waste management exacerbates the problem by clogging drainage systems, preventing the efficient flow of excess water and leading to urban flooding. These combined factors contribute to the severity and frequency of flooding in the region, highlighting the need for comprehensive strategies to mitigate their impact. The flooding crisis, initially thought to be contained within Nigeria, has now spread its destructive reach to encompass more than 10 West African nations. Among the affected countries are the Republic of Benin, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Côte d'Ivoire, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mali, Mauritania, and Nigeria itself. What began as a localized issue has escalated into a regional catastrophe, with floodwaters engulfing vast swaths of land, disrupting communities, and upending livelihoods across the affected nations. This widespread flooding has transcended national borders to become a pressing global emergency, demanding urgent attention and concerted action from the international community.
Over 60 to 70 years now, I've never seen such a thing. So maybe it may have something to do with climate change.
The toll on human lives, infrastructure, and agricultural resources is staggering, underscoring the urgent need for coordinated efforts to provide relief and support to affected populations. As homes are submerged, roads become impassable, and agricultural lands are ravaged, millions of people find themselves in dire need of assistance. The devastating consequences of the flooding extend far beyond immediate physical damage, exacerbating existing challenges and vulnerabilities in these already fragile regions. In the face of this crisis, it is imperative that the affected nations receive comprehensive support to address both short-term relief and long-term recovery efforts. Collaborative initiatives and robust disaster management strategies are essential to mitigate the impacts of future flooding events and build resilience within vulnerable communities. The gravity of the situation demands a unified response, with governments, humanitarian organizations, and the international community working together to provide aid, resources, and expertise to those most affected. Only through collective action and solidarity can we effectively confront the challenges posed by this unfolding humanitarian crisis and pave the way for a sustainable recovery and resilience building in the face of future disasters. The release of water from the Logdo Dam in Cameroon has been controversial. The Nigerian Minister for Water Resources mentioned during a budget defense at the National Assembly that Nigeria was not informed about the release until 24 hours later.
There are entire systems of not just households, but also critical infrastructure, social systems, economic systems, education, healthcare. All of these systems are impacted at the same time. And so this will lead to devastating losses at various aspects of life. We have climate change that is making these hazards more intense, more frequent, but we can also do something about it to reduce our vulnerability by improving our protection system, by upgrading our infrastructure, improving our mitigation strategies, planning for resilience ahead of time.
However, meteorological agencies had predicted the possibility of Cameroon releasing water from the dam. The controversy surrounding the Logdo Dam in Cameroon has intensified as its role in exacerbating the flooding crisis comes under scrutiny. One of the key points of contention revolves around the lack of timely communication regarding the release of water from the dam. This failure to provide prompt notification has raised significant concerns about the effectiveness of cross-border communication mechanisms in managing transboundary water resources.
Have no choice of saying we are not going to stay here, because what we see is above us. Because the flood we see, since I was born, I have never seen that kind of flood. The flood comes with speed, carry snake, and he carry a lot of animals.
Adding to the controversy is the revelation that meteorological agencies had, in fact, forecasted the possibility of Cameroon releasing water from the dam. Despite these predictions, the absence of proactive communication between relevant authorities in Cameroon and Nigeria has fueled accusations of negligence and exacerbated tensions between the two neighboring countries.
This water confused us. It confused me, I always forget what I was supposed to do, because my heart is not at peace. My heart is troubled.
The delayed response to notify downstream communities of the impending release has been criticized as a contributing factor to the severity of the flooding and its devastating impacts on lives and livelihoods. The controversy surrounding the Logdo Dam underscores the pressing need for improved coordination and communication mechanisms between riparian states sharing transboundary water resources. Addressing these challenges requires a concerted effort to enhance cooperation, foster trust, and establish effective early warning systems to mitigate the risks associated with dam operations and prevent similar crises from occurring in the future.
This is my own, because I don't have farmland. Even when flood is over, I know that there is no money now I can use now to buy something to eat. So I know that there is war ahead of me.
Only through transparent and collaborative approaches can the concerns raised by the Logdo Dam controversy be adequately addressed, ensuring the sustainable management of water resources and the protection of communities vulnerable to the impacts of flooding. The recent spate of flooding across West Africa has been attributed to a combination of climate change and various human activities that collectively exacerbate the vulnerability of communities to environmental hazards.
My house is close to the riverbank, so when the flood came, the mud houses collapsed. This is not the time I intended to sell my rice, but because my rooms have collapsed, I don't have any option but to sell my rice, because there is nowhere to keep it.
Climate scientists and environmental experts assert that the increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather events, including flooding, are directly linked to the impacts of climate change. One of the primary drivers of this phenomenon is the emission of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, CH4, primarily from the burning of fossil fuels and industrial processes.
Yeah, all this is my farm, right up to where we have the electric poles down south, combined hectares, 50 hectares of land, all cultivated with rice that has gone down the drain because of the flood.
Human activities, including deforestation, desertification, and the widespread burning of fossil fuels, contribute to the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, exacerbating the greenhouse effect. Of particular concern are chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, which not only contribute to global warming but also lead to ozone layer depletion, further intensifying the effects of climate change. These changes in atmospheric composition disrupt the Earth's climate system, leading to alterations in weather patterns and an increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, such as heavy rainfall and flooding. The consequences of these changes are starkly evident in the unprecedented flooding witnessed across West Africa this year. The combination of excessive rainfall, exacerbated by altered weather patterns attributable to climate change, has resulted in widespread inundation, displacement of communities, loss of lives, and significant damage to infrastructure and livelihoods. Moreover, the compounding effects of deforestation and desertification have further heightened the vulnerability of ecosystems and communities to the impacts of flooding, exacerbating the humanitarian and environmental crisis unfolding across the region. Addressing the root causes of these challenges requires concerted global action to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, transition to renewable energy sources, and adopt sustainable land management practices. Efforts to curb deforestation, promote afforestation and reforestation, and implement measures to enhance climate resilience are also crucial in building adaptive capacity and reducing the risks posed by climate-related disasters. By addressing both the underlying drivers of climate change and the associated human practices that exacerbate its impacts, the international community can work towards a more sustainable and resilient future for West Africa and beyond. The impact of the flooding on West African countries has been profound, with severe consequences felt across the region. Video footage and eyewitness accounts vividly depict the extent of the devastation, with major cities and towns, including parts of Lagos and Kogi State in Nigeria, submerged underwater. The scenes are reminiscent of a disaster movie, yet tragically real, highlighting the scale of the crisis unfolding in these communities. The loss of life resulting from the flooding is not only tragic, but also indicative of the urgent need for effective disaster preparedness and response mechanisms. Families have been torn apart, livelihoods destroyed, and communities left reeling in the wake of this natural disaster. The destruction of property, including homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure, further compounds the challenges faced by affected populations, exacerbating their vulnerability and hindering recovery efforts. In addition to the immediate impact on human lives and livelihoods, the flooding has also precipitated secondary hazards, including the resurgence of pests and dangerous animals. These pose additional threats to communities already grappling with the aftermath of the disaster. The proliferation of disease vectors, such as mosquitoes, increases the risk of vector-borne illnesses, while encounters with displaced wildlife further heighten safety concerns for residents and relief workers alike. The displacement of people adds another layer of complexity to the humanitarian response, straining existing resources and infrastructure in host communities and exacerbating the risk of secondary disasters, such as disease outbreaks and food shortages. With thousands of families forced to flee their homes in search of safety, the need for shelter, clean water, food, and medical care becomes increasingly urgent, underscoring the importance of coordinated efforts to provide timely assistance and support to those in need. As West African countries grapple with the immediate aftermath of the flooding and begin the long process of recovery and rebuilding, there is a pressing need for international solidarity and support. Solidarity and support, from humanitarian aid and disaster relief to long-term investments in climate resilience and sustainable development, concerted action is required to address the root causes of vulnerability and build a more resilient future for the region. By working together, the global community can help mitigate the impacts of future disasters and ensure the safety and well-being of all people, regardless of their location or circumstances.
My last-born daughter, who was holding onto my back while we were in the water, was begging me not to leave her. I reassured her and asked her to hold on to the nearby floating debris. Unfortunately, she is gone now. My eldest daughter is in hospital at my Marhu, but the rest...
The flooding in West Africa has unleashed a cascade of health and economic consequences, amplifying the challenges faced by communities already grappling with the aftermath of the disaster. One of the most pressing concerns is the significant health impact of the floods. With reports of cholera outbreaks emerging in Nigeria, the inundation of water sources and the lack of access to clean water have created ideal conditions for the spread of waterborne diseases, posing a grave risk to public health. In addition to cholera, other waterborne illnesses, such as typhoid fever and dysentery, threaten to further strain already overstretched healthcare systems. The economic ramifications of the flooding are equally severe, with disruptions rippling through key sectors of the economy. Transportation networks have been severely disrupted, hindering the movement of goods and people and impeding access to essential services.
We were on the search the whole day until this late afternoon, late morning, when we found her within the bed of the river.
Roads and bridges have been washed away, making it difficult for aid workers and relief supplies to reach affected communities in a timely manner. The resulting supply chain disruptions have exacerbated existing challenges, contributing to shortages of essential goods and driving up prices across the region. The agricultural sector has been particularly hard hit by the flooding, with crops destroyed and farmland inundated by rising waters. Many farmers have lost their livelihoods overnight, as fields once lush with crops now lie submerged beneath floodwaters. The destruction of agricultural infrastructure, such as irrigation systems and storage facilities, further compounds the challenges faced by farmers, hindering their ability to recover and rebuild. The long-term impact on food security is profound, with reduced food production and increased prices exacerbating hunger and malnutrition in already vulnerable communities. The flooding has also taken a heavy toll on small businesses and informal vendors, many of whom have lost their livelihoods, as shops and marketplaces were inundated by floodwaters. With limited access to financial resources and support, these entrepreneurs face an uphill battle to rebuild their businesses and regain their economic footing. The loss of income and livelihoods has far-reaching implications for household resilience and economic stability, further deepening the cycle of poverty and vulnerability in affected communities.
Flood has taken over everything, including our plants, our businesses.
We are living like animals, just like fish in the water. Most of our houses have been fell down in short, mostly mud houses. And if you get there, if you get to our communities, the water have gone above the zinc level.
In the face of these daunting challenges, concerted action is needed to address the immediate health needs of affected populations, strengthen healthcare systems, and support economic recovery and resilience-building efforts. By investing in sustainable infrastructure, disaster preparedness, and climate resilience, governments and international partners can help mitigate the impact of future disasters and build more resilient communities capable of weathering the storms to come. In response to the devastating flooding in Nigeria and other West African countries, the government must take proactive measures to address the immediate needs of affected communities and implement long-term strategies to mitigate the risk of future disasters. One crucial aspect of the government's response should involve providing restitution and support to affected farmers, drawing inspiration from successful initiatives implemented in other countries like Ghana. Restitution for affected farmers could take various forms, including financial assistance, subsidies for agricultural inputs such as fertilizers and seeds, and support for transitioning to mechanized farming practices. By providing targeted support to farmers who have lost their crops and livelihoods due to the flooding, the government can help restore agricultural productivity and bolster food security in affected regions.
Officials here say huge swathes of Jigawa State are underwater, including 20,000 hectares of rice paddies and cornfields. In addition to immediate concerns about destroyed livelihoods and incomes, there are fears of food shortages before the next planting season.
The government must also prioritize the enforcement of environmental regulations aimed at protecting natural waterways and ecosystems. This includes implementing strict zoning laws to prevent construction in flood-prone areas and preserving wetlands and other natural buffers that help mitigate the impact of flooding. By safeguarding natural ecosystems and adopting sustainable land use practices,
the water tore through my compound and brought down the entire house. 3 of my children died, 2 are in hospital.
The government can reduce the risk of future flooding and protect vulnerable communities from harm.
In fact, the devastation is beyond the resources of the state. As present, what we can only offer is we offer feedings, we offer beddings, and some part of mats for sleeping and mattresses, and medical care, and maybe toilet facilities in the camps and water facilities.
This flood came like that. It covered all my entire house. The money they pay me when I retire is what I take to build this house. Now I have nothing again.
The effect of climate change is boldly written all over this. The intensity of the rains have changed over time.
Improving waste management and urban planning is another critical component of the government's response to the flooding crisis. Many of the factors contributing to the severity of the flooding, including blocked drainage systems and inadequate infrastructure, are rooted in poor urban planning and inadequate waste management practices. By investing in the expansion and maintenance of drainage infrastructure, implementing waste recycling programs, and promoting sustainable urban development practices, the government can help mitigate the impact of future floods and enhance the resilience of urban areas to climate-related disasters. Ultimately, addressing the root causes of flooding in Nigeria and other West African countries requires a comprehensive and coordinated approach that integrates short-term relief efforts with long-term strategies for climate resilience and disaster risk reduction. By investing in agricultural support programs, strengthening environmental regulations, and improving urban infrastructure, the government can help build more resilient communities capable of withstanding the challenges posed by climate change and extreme weather events.
What we have is a situation where water is released by a neighboring country, and then we don't have the infrastructure to really accept that water.
The effects of flooding, particularly in Nigeria and other West African countries, have been devastating, resulting in significant loss of lives and properties. One of the most tragic consequences of flooding is the loss of human lives. Many people have perished as a result of drowning, swept away by the fast-moving waters, or trapped in submerged areas. These casualties represent a profound human tragedy, leaving families and communities devastated by the sudden loss of loved ones. In addition to the loss of lives, flooding has wrought extensive damage to properties across affected regions. Homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure have been inundated by floodwaters, leading to widespread destruction. Houses have been washed away or severely damaged, leaving countless families homeless and in desperate need of shelter. Businesses have been forced to shut down, disrupting livelihoods and economic activities. Schools, hospitals, and public buildings have also suffered damage, further exacerbating the impact of the disaster.
We have deployed hundreds of trucks of relief items, food and non-food items, to these affected areas. In fact, to the whole country, in all the states of the Federation, including the Federal Capital Territory.
The displacement of people is another dire consequence of flooding, with many individuals and families forced to flee their homes in search of safety. These internally displaced persons, IDPs, often find themselves living in makeshift shelters or crowded evacuation centers, facing uncertain futures and heightened vulnerability. The displacement caused by flooding compounds the humanitarian crisis, straining resources and putting additional pressure on already fragile communities. Moreover, the effects of flooding extend beyond the immediate loss of lives and properties to include long-term social, economic, and environmental consequences. Communities may struggle to recover from the devastation wrought by flooding, facing challenges such as food insecurity, loss of livelihoods, and increased vulnerability to disease outbreaks. The environmental impact of flooding, including contamination of water sources and destruction of ecosystems, can further exacerbate the humanitarian crisis and hamper recovery efforts.
I've lost my properties and my farmland with my grains. My wives and my children are in an internally displaced persons camp. I don't know how they're feeding themselves, nor the state of their health. As you can see, all of my people have relocated away from here. This community and many communities in our local government area have been taken away by floods. My properties are gone, my farmland as well. I lost 2 tractors.
The floods have triggered a resurgence of waterborne diseases, posing significant health risks to affected populations. Among the most concerning of these diseases is cholera, a highly contagious bacterial infection that spreads through contaminated water and food. The flooding has led to the contamination of drinking water sources with sewage, debris, and other pollutants, creating ideal conditions for the transmission of cholera and other waterborne pathogens. Cholera outbreaks are particularly dangerous in flood-affected areas where access to clean water and sanitation facilities is limited or compromised. Contaminated water sources become breeding grounds for the cholera bacterium, allowing it to multiply rapidly and infect individuals who consume or come into contact with the contaminated water. Inadequate sanitation practices further exacerbate the spread of the disease, as improper disposal of waste and lack of hygiene contribute to the contamination of water sources and the transmission of cholera. The consequences of cholera outbreaks can be severe, leading to widespread illness, hospitalizations, and deaths, especially among vulnerable populations such as children, the elderly, and individuals with weakened immune systems. The symptoms of cholera include severe diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration, which can quickly escalate into life-threatening conditions if left untreated.
We'll make sure that they are adequately protected because we have stepped up our operations and we have heightened security.
In flood-affected areas where healthcare infrastructure may be overwhelmed or inaccessible, the impact of cholera outbreaks can be particularly devastating, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and hindering recovery efforts. Efforts to control cholera outbreaks in flood-affected areas typically involve a combination of public health interventions aimed at preventing the spread of the disease and providing medical treatment to affected individuals. These interventions may include the provision of clean drinking water, the promotion of proper hygiene and sanitation practices, the distribution of oral rehydration solutions and antibiotics, and the implementation of vaccination campaigns in high-risk areas.
This food is not enough for about 3,000 people that is here. 3,000 people depend on this food, and we got it from charity ones.
The agricultural impact of the floods is profound, with devastating consequences for both current food supplies and future agricultural productivity. One of the immediate effects is the destruction of crops that were nearing harvest, causing significant losses for farmers and threatening food security in affected regions. The inundation of farmland by floodwaters submerges crops, leading to their rotting or drowning, rendering them unsalvageable for consumption or sale. This loss of crops not only affects the livelihoods of farmers, but also disrupts food supply chains, leading to shortages and price hikes in local markets.
Normally we eat 3 square meals, but as it stands now, we take our meals 2 times in a day. We take late in the morning and then early in the evening. Then we go to bed.
We are left with nothing to cope with life. We now get into the first floors of our houses in canoes. I don't know how we're going to get back from what's lost from the flood. We don't have anything to eat.
We are calling on the government and international donors to assist us. Please, show some compassion and help us.
Furthermore, the depletion of soil nutrients caused by flooding exacerbates the agricultural impact, posing long-term challenges for future food production. Floodwaters carry sediment and debris that can deposit silt and contaminants onto farmland, altering soil composition and fertility. The inundation of fields can also lead to soil erosion, washing away topsoil and essential nutrients vital for plant growth. As a result, flooded areas may experience reduced soil productivity and diminished agricultural yields in subsequent growing seasons, further compromising food security and economic stability. The agricultural impact of flooding extends beyond immediate crop losses to encompass broader challenges such as disrupted planting schedules, damaged infrastructure, and increased susceptibility to pests and diseases. Farmers may struggle to replant their fields in the wake of flooding, facing delays due to waterlogged soil, inaccessible fields, and limited access to seeds and agricultural inputs. Additionally, damaged irrigation systems, roads, and storage facilities further impede agricultural recovery efforts, hindering the restoration of normal farming activities. Addressing the agricultural impact of flooding requires a multifaceted approach that combines short-term relief efforts with long-term resilience building measures. Immediate interventions may include providing emergency assistance to affected farmers, such as food aid, seed distributions, and financial support to rebuild livelihoods. Meanwhile, long-term strategies should focus on improving agricultural infrastructure, promoting sustainable farming practices, and enhancing resilience to future flood events through measures such as soil conservation, floodplain management, and crop diversification.
There's nothing to go back to if my house is left standing. My animals, crops, everything is gone.
The ecological damage caused by flooding extends beyond immediate visible impacts to encompass long-term environmental degradation and loss of biodiversity, significantly altering the landscape's ecological balance. One of the most significant consequences is the erosion of topsoil, which serves as a vital foundation for plant growth and ecosystem health. Floodwaters carry sediment and debris, which, when deposited onto land, can lead to the removal of nutrient-rich topsoil layers through erosion processes such as sheet erosion, gully erosion, and stream bank erosion.
Adiyambo says her home has been flooded. There's no place for her children to safely sleep, she says, and finding somewhere to cook is a hassle.
As topsoil is washed away by floodwaters, essential nutrients necessary for plant growth are lost, resulting in diminished soil fertility and reduced agricultural productivity. This erosion of topsoil not only affects agricultural lands, but also disrupts natural ecosystems, leading to the degradation of habitats and loss of biodiversity. Plants, microorganisms, and small animals dependent on healthy soil conditions may struggle to survive or reproduce in areas impacted by soil erosion, leading to declines in species diversity and ecological resilience.
I, as a keke driver, quite right, it affected us, and it affected us very, very well. Affected me most especially, because people are no longer living in this area. People have migrated to other places, so we don't longer see passengers to carry. It's only these canoe people that they are the one doing the shuttle services. So we don't have anything like keke or bus or even other vehicles that we normally use for transportations. We do it together with our yard people. We paid for over 5 trips of sand that we dropped along the street in front of our yard to know if it can be able to stop this flood from entering our house, but all to no avail. The whole effort proved abortive. It couldn't work because the flood is too much.
Furthermore, flooding can alter the physical characteristics of the landscape, reshaping riverbanks, wetlands, and floodplains, and causing habitat destruction and fragmentation. Riparian ecosystems, which depend on periodic flooding for nutrient replenishment and species dispersal, may be adversely affected by changes in flood patterns and intensity, leading to habitat loss for aquatic and terrestrial species. Wetlands, which serve as critical habitats for waterfowl, fish, and other wildlife, may suffer from prolonged inundation or drainage, disrupting ecosystem functions and diminishing their capacity to provide valuable ecological services such as water filtration, flood control, and carbon sequestration. In addition to soil erosion and habitat loss, flooding can also introduce pollutants and contaminants into the environment, posing risks to water quality and aquatic ecosystems. Chemical runoff from urban areas, industrial facilities, and agricultural fields may be carried by floodwaters into rivers, lakes, and estuaries, contaminating water sources and harming aquatic life. Moreover, the deposition of sediment and debris onto riverbeds and stream channels can alter hydrological processes, leading to changes in water flow patterns, sediment transport dynamics, and channel morphology, with implications for ecosystem health and water resource management. Addressing the ecological damage caused by flooding requires comprehensive strategies that prioritize ecosystem restoration, habitat conservation, and sustainable land management practices. Efforts to mitigate soil erosion, restore riparian buffers, and protect wetlands can help preserve critical habitats and enhance ecosystem resilience to future flood events. Furthermore, measures to reduce pollution inputs, improve water quality monitoring, and promote sustainable land use planning can help safeguard aquatic ecosystems and minimize the environmental impacts of flooding on natural resources and biodiversity. The economic impact of flooding extends far beyond immediate property damage, encompassing disruptions to transportation networks, trade flows, and market dynamics that reverberate throughout the affected region's economy. One of the most significant consequences of flooding is the disruption of transportation infrastructure, as roads, bridges, and rail lines may become impassable or severely damaged by floodwaters and debris. This disruption in transportation networks hampers the movement of goods and people, impeding supply chains, delaying deliveries, and increasing logistical costs for businesses and consumers.
We were not properly informed on the magnitude of what we will face because if they did, we would have made plans to evacuate. We thought it was the normal flooding that happens every year when the river overflows its boundaries.
The flood came suddenly and met us unprepared. all the houses and the camp, which served as settlements for farmers, are underwater.
Moreover, flooding can have long-term economic consequences for affected communities, as the loss of livelihoods, businesses, and productive assets undermines local economies' resilience and capacity to recover.
We had to carry the fuel in canoes and pay off militants along the way. Even security personnel harass us.
You have to fuel your generator to be able to know what is happening around you. You know, the only thing we are trying to do now is to stay safe with you and your family.
Smallholder farmers, who depend on agriculture for their income and sustenance, may face financial hardship and food insecurity in the aftermath of flooding, as they struggle to replant crops, restore damaged infrastructure, and rebuild their livelihoods. Similarly, businesses operating in flood-affected areas, such as retail stores, markets, and manufacturing facilities, may experience disruptions to operations, supply chains, and customer demand, leading to revenue losses and employment instability. Furthermore, the economic impacts of flooding are often compounded by social vulnerabilities and disparities, as marginalized communities and low-income households bear a disproportionate burden of the disaster's costs and consequences. Vulnerable populations lacking access to financial resources, insurance coverage, or social safety nets may struggle to recover from flooding-induced losses, perpetuating cycles of poverty and inequality in the long term. Moreover, the displacement of people from flooded areas can strain social services, housing markets, and infrastructure systems in receiving communities, further exacerbating socio-economic challenges and disparities. Improving infrastructure by enhancing drainage systems and preventing the blockage of waterways is crucial for mitigating the effects of flooding. Properly designed and maintained drainage systems can efficiently channel excess water away from urban areas, reducing the risk of inundation. Additionally, clearing debris and vegetation from waterways helps to maintain their capacity and flow, preventing them from becoming blocked during heavy rainfall. By investing in infrastructure upgrades and maintenance, communities can better withstand and recover from flooding events. Reforestation and proper land management play vital roles in reducing the impact of floods. Planting trees helps to stabilize soil, prevent erosion, and absorb excess water, thereby reducing runoff during heavy rainfall. Moreover, trees contribute to the maintenance of local ecosystems and biodiversity, which further supports natural flood mitigation. Implementing sustainable land use planning practices, such as preserving natural wetlands and limiting development in flood-prone areas, can also help minimize the risk of flooding. By investing in reforestation efforts and adopting responsible land management strategies, communities can build resilience to flooding and protect both people and the environment. Promoting the use of renewable energy sources, such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power, can significantly contribute to mitigating climate change and reducing the risk of flooding. Unlike fossil fuels, which release greenhouse gases when burned, renewable energy sources generate electricity without emitting carbon dioxide and other pollutants that contribute to global warming. By transitioning to renewable energy, countries can reduce their carbon footprint and decrease the rate of climate change-induced extreme weather events, including heavy rainfall and flooding. Additionally, investing in renewable energy infrastructure creates job opportunities and stimulates economic growth while promoting environmental sustainability. By embracing renewable energy technologies, communities can help build a more resilient and climate-resilient future.
They just don't have an incentive to address this. Because when you have a system where emergency funds are released without accountability, we have processes where there's no proper procurement for those funds. A lot of people benefit from this. There's a whole political economy around these floods. I worry that we might not even be able to recover quick enough before the next flood.
Government interventions play a crucial role in addressing the impacts of flooding and supporting affected communities. By providing subsidies, fertilizers, and other forms of assistance to affected farmers, governments can help them recover from crop losses and financial hardships caused by flooding. These measures enable farmers to replant crops and restore agricultural productivity, contributing to food security and economic stability in flood-affected areas.
We feel what we have taken is adequate for the moment, but the subnationals also have a responsibility to see that their citizens are being, supported.
Additionally, governments can implement policies and regulations to regulate construction activities and improve waste management practices. By enforcing building codes and zoning regulations that restrict construction in flood-prone areas and promote sustainable urban planning, governments can reduce the risk of future flooding and minimize property damage and human displacement. Moreover, investing in infrastructure improvements, such as building resilient drainage systems and maintaining natural waterways, can enhance flood resilience and protect communities from the adverse effects of extreme weather events. Through coordinated government interventions and proactive policy measures, countries can effectively mitigate the impacts of flooding and build more resilient communities for the future. Raising awareness and promoting preparedness are essential components of mitigating the impact of flooding on communities. By educating the public about the risks associated with building structures on natural waterways and the consequences of improper waste disposal, authorities can empower individuals to make informed decisions that reduce the likelihood of flooding. Additionally, disseminating information about early warning systems and emergency preparedness plans equips communities with the knowledge and tools needed to respond swiftly and effectively to flooding events. Through educational campaigns, workshops, and community outreach programs, governments and non-governmental organizations can raise awareness about the importance of flood-resistant construction practices and the need to preserve natural waterways. By emphasizing the value of sustainable land use planning and environmentally friendly waste management strategies, communities can minimize their vulnerability to flooding and enhance their resilience to extreme weather events. Furthermore, the establishment of early warning systems, coupled with the development of emergency response protocols, enables authorities to alert residents about impending floods and coordinate evacuation efforts in a timely manner. By investing in technology and infrastructure to support these initiatives, governments can improve their capacity to monitor weather patterns, assess flood risks, and communicate critical information to at-risk communities. Overall, by prioritizing awareness building and preparedness initiatives, governments can empower communities to proactively mitigate the impact of flooding and safeguard lives, property, and natural resources against the adverse effects of extreme weather events. In conclusion, the recent flooding in West Africa underscores the urgent need for concerted action to address the complex interplay of climate change and human activities driving these events. It is evident that a comprehensive approach is necessary, one that encompasses government intervention, infrastructure improvement, and sustainable environmental practices. By adopting a multifaceted strategy, including measures such as enhancing drainage systems, promoting reforestation, and transitioning to renewable energy sources, countries can begin to mitigate the impact of future floods and build resilience against environmental hazards. Additionally, governments must prioritize the well-being of affected communities by providing support and resources to facilitate recovery and reconstruction efforts. Ultimately, the goal should be to foster greater resilience and adaptive capacity among vulnerable populations, while also promoting sustainable development practices that reduce the likelihood of future flooding disasters. By working together and implementing proactive solutions, we can strive towards a more resilient and sustainable future for all in West Africa and beyond.